Thank you for watching Eastern Volleyball Network. My name is Graham Wren. Unfortunately, we are not going to be joined by my typical co-host, Kevin Knight, today. Sad he couldn't make it, but I'm here to bring you guys a little bit of a little different content than what you'd normally see. I'm going to talk about the top 5 players in the Mid-Atlantic region on the men's side. I'm real excited to make this video. Been thinking about it a lot, and a lot of times making a determination for who's at the top is relatively easy. But then once you maybe take out a spot or two, and then you start to really look at people head to head, things get really interesting. So I'm kind of excited to announce my takes based on purely objective criteria. I was gonna go ahead and do this. We're just going to base it off of the finishes. We're not going to base it off of my opinion of someone's, X, Y, or Z skill. Just doing this purely based on their finishes from this past year. Purely performance-based. Before I talk about the top 5, I'm going to go through some honorable mentions, people that just didn't quite make it for whatever reason. First, I'm going to talk about Adam Roberts and Jeff Samuels. And I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're saying, what's going on? You've got 2 guys that have played multiple AVP main draws, not in your top 5. Why are you doing that? And I'm doing it because I don't consider them local players at this point. I think they were local players this past year based on COVID circumstance. And there's a reasonable assumption that if COVID goes away and the AVP season happens as normal and the country opens back up, that neither of them will be local. That's a very conceivable future. It's also conceivable that they do not and that they stay here. And at that point, we will grant them the highest honor of being Mid-Atlantic local regional players. But until that point, and for the purposes of this video, they are not up for discussion. Some honorable mentions. First, I'm going to talk about Matt Helmick. Matt, 6'6", the big guy. He's got buttery hands, sides out well, brings some service pressure, does a lot of good things on the court. Unfortunately for Matt, we had to base this list based off of objective criteria only. So Eastern Volleyball Network co-host, big guy magic, sexiest Mid-Atlantic volleyball player, they don't add any points for you. So unfortunately, Matt Helmick did not make the cut. Similarly, thinking of big guy magic, we got the Durkee sandwich, Brian Dirks. Dirks played some good ball this year. He played with a variety of different people. Dad grunts, friendliness, and an amazing father. Not objective criteria. Didn't get him into the top 5. So Brian Dirks is out. Next, we have Eddie Mushikin. Relatively new to the beach. Typically more known for his presence on the hard court and on the grass court. Made a real strong transition to the beach, played a lot more beach this summer than he had previously, and had some good finishes to go with it. Played with a variety of different partners, even took a Captain Bill's victory playing with Jeff Samuels. And a lot of people would say, well, wow, look at that, That should put him in the top 5, but unfortunately for me, it just doesn't quite do it. And I think that, Eddie has a lot of other things going for him that if we were using unobjective criteria would get him into the top 5. Like if we talked about potential Armenian mob ties, that could push him into the top 5. But I respect the integrity of what I'm doing here too much to let that elevate Eddie's status. And then kind of on top of that, and, this almost detracts from it, the average in the normal human body can use and absorb 20 amino acids. Eddie, with his NTM core supplement hookup, is actually capable of consuming and processing 21 amino acids. So it's almost not even a level playing field with, capabilities like that. So when you take all that into consideration, I just don't think he's quite there in the top 5. Great player, though. Next guy I want to talk about, we'll talk about Pat Cronshaw. New to the Virginia Beach area, big blocker, 6'7", left-handed. Unfortunately just doesn't have the number of finishes in our area this summer. Didn't really get to play many tournaments, was moving a lot, was probably being pretty COVID conscious too, and all of those things. And then again, if we were going by unobjective criteria, we could say, surfboard collection, sponsorships, second cutest puppy in the Mid-Atlantic. It's not enough for the top 5, unfortunately. I'm sorry, big guy. Another Virginia Beach player, Bryce Earnhart, well known for having a very well-rounded toolkit. Does some good things on the court. Started the season in the spring off pretty strong, had some strong finishes. Unfortunately, went down to Captain Bill's and laid a bit of an egg, struggled in another tournament or two, and then kind of disappeared. I don't think that he disappeared for those reasons. I think life happens, and he was unable to play. I know he really wanted to be there. He wasn't able to be there. But the lack of, kind of the fact that he ended his season kind of not quite performing to where he wanted to be and where he thinks he can be and where people kind of have come to expect him to be. Unfortunately, it just doesn't put him in the top 5. And then along unobjective criteria, we've got CrossFit with a question mark. And, I don't even know if that's a positive or a negative, but it's not enough to get him into the top 5. David Arnold, another local Virginia Beach guy, kind of got his season cut short, truncated by deployment and subsequent, quarantining issues and family life and all of those things. Didn't get to play that many tournaments, was kind of came back behind the ball, so to speak, as a result of the deployment. I'm looking forward to what he's going to bring to the table next year. Unfortunately, putt wizard and just all bar game wizard in general, particularly like foosball. The dude's a wizard on the foosball court. None of that's subjective criteria. I love the dude, but does not quite crack the top 5. Nick Drucker is probably a name a lot of people were thinking might be on this list, but unfortunately for me, Nick is just outside the top 5. Had some strong finishes. Unfortunately, a lot of Nick's strong finishes came at kind of the smaller local tournament levels. And like in particular, the larger Virginia Beach event that Adam Roberts and Ian Satterfield came to, he took a 5th, I believe. Also has a 9th at Captain Bill's on his resume. If he and Angel had beaten Jeff and Eddie in the finals, we might be having a different conversation, but they did not, unfortunately. So, he's right on the cusp. And then cutest puppy in the Mid-Atlantic, it's not objective criteria. And then I also kind of want to tell a story. Lauren and I this past weekend were watching, we were looking for a new show to watch on Netflix. We started watching The Vampire Diaries, and season 1, episode 1 starts up, and next thing I know, I look up, and it's like, holy shit, it's Nick Drucker on the screen. And you might be thinking, that's got to get him into the top 5. And unfortunately, it just doesn't quite cut it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go Google Vampire Diaries. The character's name is Stefan. It's like a dead ringer for Nick Drucker. Other honorable mentions, Andrew McMurray. Andrew's an interesting one because I feel like Andrew had some pretty high peaks, but then also some pretty low valleys. The consistency of finishes was not quite there in my mind, unfortunately, for Andrew to crack this top 5. And then if you want to talk about unobjective top 5, Andrew is one of the funniest people I know. He's also got great hair. Unfortunately, neither of those criteria is objective, though I might make an exception if he starts wearing a bucket hat on top of his afro. I think I would love to see it. I think the rest of the Mid-Atlantic would love to see it. I think Rocky would love to see it, and I think you should start rocking that. At least, the February and March of 2021, see how it feels, see if it impacts your play at all. I mean, heck, with a bucket on the court, you might find you're getting a couple more scoops. Who knows? Might help you out. Will Rodriguez, another guy we want to talk about, a springy 6'5" blocker out of Georgia, moved to Florida partway through the season. I'm not entirely sure on the date. I want to say it was like partway through September. So in my mind, he spent the majority of the season local to the Mid-Atlantic and then left us, which, again, if we were counting unobjective criteria, it would be a strike against. But luckily, I'm basing this on objective criteria. Unfortunately for Will moved down to Florida. And, when people think about what do you have to worry about when you move to Florida, first thing people say is Gators. The second thing people say is hurricanes. And I'm sure Will in his mind was like, okay, you know what? I'm moving to Florida. It's a new area. I've got to be ready. Gators, hurricanes, not letting anything happen there. Unfortunately, what he didn't realize was that those hurricanes can follow you out of Florida, and one of those hurricanes, in the form of Austin Hurricane Banks, followed him to Myrtle Beach and knocked him and Eddie out of Myrtle Beach. Unfortunately, not exactly the finish he was looking for. Great player, just didn't quite crack the top 5. I also point out Will played the most events out of anybody, which I think is a big positive check mark. I think a lot of people, if they had to bet who played the most tournaments, I know me personally, I would have put my money on Kevin Knight. The dude travels everywhere. Will played a good, 8 to 9 more events than Kevin, which is just wild to me. When you consider how much Kevin plays and that Kevin, travels to Ohio almost every chance he gets, does all those things, goes to Tennessee, goes to Florida, goes to, everywhere in North Carolina, Virginia. And Will had a good 7, 8, 9 more tournaments, which is just wild. Last honorable mention I'm gonna talk about, none other than Cameron Beans. Cameron Beans, a lot of people might not even think of as Mid-Atlantic, but I believe Maryland is part of the Mid-Atlantic. And, good for him holding down the entire state of Maryland, because I don't know if we've ever seen a beach player other than him out of the Maryland area. We used to have Ryan Charterina up there as well. A great guy, short guy, muscle hamster. I think it's just Cam. And kind of for that reason, Cam travels all over the place. I don't think Cam had the number of local finishes to, against the local competition to prove that he belonged in the top 5. And then, if we're talking about unobjective criteria, the dude's hair is sloppy. It just is. It's sloppy, and, we can't have somebody like that in the top 5. I think with that, with no further ado, I'm ready to talk about the top 5 for the Mid-Atlantic region. Coming in at number 5. And number 5 and number 4 were real tough for me, but I had to go ahead and stick with my guts here. At number 5, we have Brian Tillman. In previous years, I think Tillman would have been a good bit higher on this list, but Tillman didn't play that many tournaments this year. I don't know if he won a tournament, kind of gained more notoriety as being a great finals ref than winning a tournament. But Tillman showed up and played the big events, and Tillman finished very highly at the big events. And a lot of people, that typically show up to tournaments and are, checking off seconds and thirds, all of a sudden Tillman shows up and they're checking off fifths. And a big part of that is that, it's this big event and Tillman shows up. And a lot of people are going to sit there and say, well, the dude sets at like an AAA level. That's got to count against him. And my counter argument to that is, if it was so bad, he'd be losing more matches, right? But everything else makes up for it enough for him to crack this top 5 list. As I'm sure that some of you, if not all of you, have noticed, there's a little bit of Nickelback playing in the background, and that's not by accident. I think there's a lot of people, especially on the honorable mention list, when they heard Tillman's name come out, their first reaction was, kind of a overcompensated, ew, gross, that's disgusting, I hate that, blah, blah, blah. But much like people's opinion of Nickelback, deep down, they know they love it, they know he belongs among the greats, and that's why Tillman's in the top 5. Coming in at number 4, we've got Caleb Jennis. Kind of a surprise pick that I don't think a lot of people saw coming. He had some strong local finishes, similarly strong finishes to a lot of other local players. But he also took a 5th at Wapaka, which is was a huge sand event this year with a stacked field, and he went up there and took a 5th. And in my mind, that speaks volumes, and it's enough to vault him over. I think a lot of his other finishes are on par with a lot of other honorable mention players. But Caleb was also, one of those players who was still making semifinals and finals at big events, at big regional events, and then traveled to, what would be one of the, I'd say, top 3 or 4 largest tournament of the year, and took a 5th. And I think that counts for a lot. So I've got him at number 4. Number 3, this one's going to be kind of controversial as well. I've got Nolan Albrecht. Nolan only played 2 events this year, which is kind of wild. And, I kind of questioned including him in the top 5 versus just kind of writing him off as not playing enough events. But the problem is that his 2 showings were so unbelievably strong. He played at Captain Bill's with Mark Fornicari, and, by the way, forgot about him, but I'll go ahead and do Mark's honorable mention real quick. Had some finishes across the board, kind of ranged, took a 1st with Nolan, but also had like some 7ths and 9ths and 13ths in there. Looked like he'd lost a step or 2. I don't know if Father Time or Big Tobacco caught up to him, but one of them did, and unfortunately, it's enough to knock him out of the top 5. But Nolan won a tournament with Mark, and they did not have an easy road. They had a stacked bracket that they had to go through. No easy matches the entire way. Beat JP and Misha, beat Kevin and Dave Arnold, beat, I think, Ian Bicko and Eddie Mushikin, then beat Kevin and Dave again, really solidifying dominance at that event, and then beat Angel and Caleb in the final. And then the other event he played was the large Virginia Beach Open, where he and Kevin notched a victory over Adam Roberts and Ian Satterfield, and were competing very hard in the finals until his I don't know if he pulled a muscle, cramped, or something, but something happened with his leg. They ended up having to essentially forfeit the final because it was just to the point where they were no longer competing. But 2 really strong finishes like that is enough for me to go ahead and move him up to number 3. At number 2, I've got Kevin Knight, and this is going to irk a lot of people as well. Kevin, a lot of people talk about, when they talk about players who are really, really good, they want to talk about people who make the game look easy and, perform every single skill effortlessly. Kevin is not these things. Kevin has essentially figured out that he can bomb jump serves and be a solid blocker inside out and set well. And it's good enough to win events. And he does it well enough to win events. And, he's got some of the best marquee victories this season. Knocked off Adam Roberts twice. And frankly, was a match point swing out away from beating Adam Roberts a 3rd time. Beat Adam and Ian, beat Adam and Trevor Crabb. I don't know if you guys know who that is. That's kind of a big deal. So he's got some marquee wins, a lot of events, a lot of strong finishes, and all of that kind of added together brings Kevin up to number 2. And then, as I'm sure no one is surprised, number 1, we've got Angel. Angel, won big shots, took 3rd at AVP Clearwater Nationals, took 5th at Wapaka. So, really strong national level event performances this year, as well as consistently being the guy to beat at local events. So Angel's at the top. If you like this and you agree, let me know. If you disagree and don't like it, let me know as well. Love to hear it. Thank you for watching Eastern Volley Network. And with that, I'm going to go to bed. Have a good night.